So you've got dozens of Kingshot heroes to choose from, and you can only use 5 of them in the arena. But have no fear, because I'm here to help unravel the mysteries of Arena and Conquest team formation to help you make the most of your hero investments. For each hero generation, I'll be sharing a tier list that explains who is in the Arena meta and why it works. And special thanks to Shadow Ares in Kingdom 21, Dutton in 231, and Bella Psycho in 255 for helping stress test the tier list with me. Now this tier list is a companion video to this Conquest tips video also releasing today, and that includes tips and tricks that work regardless of hero formation that you're using, so be sure to check out that link below in the description to watch it. Before we jump into that first tier list, we have to level set on some ground rules and how to read these. Now first off, it assumes that there's a roughly even level of investment between all the heroes that I'm going to show here. Obviously, if you have a 5-star hero with max widgets from an older generation, it will likely perform better than a new generation hero at a couple stars without their widgets built. So use your judgment accordingly. And while I am specifying who goes in frontline versus backline for these formations, I am not specifying the left and right positions. You can shuffle these a bit, and in fact you might want to depending on the lineup that you're facing. I talk about this much more in that other tip video I mentioned, so go check it out. Also, this is not an in-depth look at each hero and their abilities, since this is more about formations as a whole. For discussion on individual hero skills, check out my hero reviews playlist linked below in the description. And as a final note, this is a tier list to make the best formations about who you have. Expedition mode should still be the primary driver of selecting which heroes to build, since that game mode is responsible for the vast majority of return on hero investment. If you do decide which heroes to build with Conquest and Arena as the primary driver, then it's a bit like the tail wagging the dog for the rest of your account. Anyway, enough about all that. Now that we're on the same page, let's dive in with our Gen 1 tier list. And we'll start off with the S tier. Now to get into S tier with a team, it requires you having built both Helga and Amadeus. That's just the fact of the matter with the way that these heroes are made. Now notice Amadeus is in the back row. This is because his ability to deal damage increases when he has more health, so it sort of defeats the purpose of him as a damage dealer if you put him in the front line. Instead, you should either put Howard in the front, or occasionally you can use Saul in the front row. This works due to his armor boosts as well as support from Helga's stun. And if you wanted to try a more damage-oriented approach and allow yourself to put an AoE damage dealer in the back like Yanu, then this might help you break through some Conquest stages where the other formation doesn't work. And it also works pretty well in Arena with high investment. Now our A tier is basically Helga and no Amadeus. Arguably, some Helga and Amadeus formations on frontline would fit here, but if you have those, you should just put Amadeus on the backline and do the S tier formations instead. In this tier, Howard helps hold down the front line while Saul provides a stun, and the remaining 2 spots can go to a mix of heroes that do area of effect ability damage like Jabel, Chenko, or Yanu. Or additionally, if the enemy formation requires a high single target burst damage down, such as an opposing Amadeus carelessly put on the front line, then Quinn can actually be a good choice. B tier is super free to play friendly. You can do these with Jabel plus all purple or even blue heroes. I put Seth in the front line over Gordon here because the math on Gordon's heal doesn't really add much, and Seth has a bigger health pool. You could even put Chenko here due to her 70% armor bonus, which makes her a better tank than Gordon. Otherwise, you want AoE damage dealing here, and heroes like Diana will probably be the fastest growing heroes you have to answer that call. Also, I realize I don't have any formations here with Saul but no Helga. Since Generation 1 is so short, you basically need to be somewhat of a spender to build him equally as the other heroes listed here, in which case you probably would have access to Helga too. And if you're a low spender that did put a bunch of shards into Saul so that he is reasonably built, then you could sub him in for Quinn as a better single target damage dealer that also comes with that stun. Or you could drop him in for Seth on the front line. If he has investment in his widget levels, then this will make him beefier than Seth up front anyway. And then finally we have our C tier, and this is more for the early days of the game. We're talking the first week or 2. These are the heroes you'll get shards for the quickest, and they do a decent job at helping you clear Conquest quickly and build up passive income from it. However, you should look to switch out of this tier as quickly as possible. Now before we jump into the Generation 2 tier list, I want to say a special thank you to my Sloth Squad channel members whose continued support helps make guides like these possible. And also thanks to the Play Smarter community who've made a way for serious spenders to invest smarter and support my channel leveraging your in-game spend when you check out with creator code SLOTH. If you want a trustworthy, concierge-like approach to buying packs at a discount that follows you from game to game and treats you like a VIP, then check out the link below in the description for details. In Generation 2, we see all 3 of the new heroes make an appearance in the S tier. Amadeus is also still very much in the mix at S tier given his higher base stats and great moveset. We even see a version of him on the front row to make room for Hilda's healing and Marlon's AoE stun without sacrificing Jabel's AoE stun. Given that combo, Amadeus does not need to be relied on for his damage as much and falls into the role of a meat shield up front. Now I didn't put it here for space, but there's also a weird variant of some of these S tier teams where you can put Zoe in the back right position with Amadeus and Helga in the front line. When this happens, her ability times right before Marlon's, which makes his AoE highly effective. And if she's on the right side, she still soaks up damage before the rest of the backline. So try it out if you're stuck on a conquest level. While Marlon and Jabel can do similar things, I would actually prioritize putting Marlon in the back left safety slot because Jabel's more likely to march up and get into the fray while Marlon will stay at the backline. And if you don't know what I mean by any of that terminology, then go watch the companion video that I released today, it'll explain it all there. Now for A tier, we see a lot of the Gen 2 heroes represented in the formation, but they have some pieces missing that make the S tiers work so well. However, this A tier relies on some of the tricks from Gen 1 formations and is therefore pretty close in effectiveness to the S tier, and you can still get very good results. B tier is what you get when you're choosing to build one other hero besides Zoe, who everyone should be taking from the roulette wheel. You either have Marlon providing his high damage and AoE stun, or Hilda providing substantial heals and some minor disruption. Both of these heroes work pretty well, but players are more likely to have the Marlon configuration due to his great expedition kit that provides additional incentive to build him over Hilda. In C tier is our free-to-play friendly setup. We finally have 2 proper infantry tanks in the front row with Zoe and Howard, but we are relying on Gen 1 damage dealers in the back row. They still hold up reasonably well since Gen 2 heroes except for Zoe all have the same defense as Gen 1 heroes, so you can still do decent damage output in relative terms even against the new heroes. Alright, let's talk a little bit about Generation 3. Generation 3 has a big step up in conquest stats versus prior generations because the defensive stat is now also increasing. And they've all raised 50% over all prior generation heroes, except Zoe who had a slight bump in Generation 2. Now this opens the aperture of formations across all tiers to include some unexpected heroes in the front line, like Jaeger or Petra in some formations, since they are tied with Eric for highest defense in the game at this point. We also still see Hilda prevalent in the S tier formations due to increasing value of her healing ability. This is because when hero defenses are higher, it's reducing the damage taken, and that makes being able to heal that smaller amount of damage even more effective for prolonging the uptime of the new generation heroes. We also see Marlon still very well represented due to his area of effect damage and stun toolkit. Zoe still hangs on in one of the S tier formations due to her somewhat competitive defense, but you really need to have Amadeus well built plus the other Gen 3 heroes to make up for the loss of Eric and stay in S tier. And then in A tier, we have mostly formations with 2 of the 3 Gen 3 heroes, or Amadeus who has almost as strong stats, but strong abilities to make up for it. Any of the Gen 2 heroes can still play a role here, but you are still relying heavily on Marlon's great AoE abilities. And then we get to our B tier teams, and these are still heavily relying on past generations area of effect heroes like Marlon and Jabel as the core of the formation, but they now have fewer options to protect and support them from Generation 3. And some of these B tier teams operate pretty close to some of the A tier teams listed above, so they are worth trying out if you have the corresponding heroes. And finally, C tier are relying on previously free-to-play accessible heroes, which means you don't have 2 orange infantry on the front line. And Howard is starting to noticeably fall off. Now you can solve this problem by putting Petra in a front row slot, but then you lose the uptime of your only Gen 3 hero, who, by the way, is a great single target damage dealer. Since even many free-to-play players will have chosen to build Marlon in Generation 2, this can also still be viable since he does drive the damage dealing over Petra. But without him, you probably want Petra in the back row, and you're taking the best you have of past generations. I put Saul, but you could get away with Quinn or even Yanu or Diana if you still need additional AoE damage on top of Jabel. Either way, this will be a tough generation if you haven't taken any non-wheel hero yet, which some players may have chosen to do to save for Generation 4. And finally, there is again that weird Zoe in the back row variant I mentioned earlier, for all of these tiers shown here, which can still be effective with formations that include Marlon. Arguably, it is easier to pull off since you have more choices for frontline heroes now, such as switching Zoe and Petra between back and front. Okay, now Generation 4 gets pretty crazy. It has a massive increase in stats. In fact, the biggest jump we'll cover in this tier video is from Generation 3 to 4, which is even bigger in both relative and absolute terms than going from Generation 4 to 5. So that already sets the stage immediately to understand why all of these heroes are so prevalent in the top formations. Accordingly, S tier has all 3 new heroes with a combination of Eric, Petra, Jaeger, and Amadeus sprinkled in. All of these are variations on the same strategy essentially, which is to buy time to let Margot do her thing with massive AoE damage. I didn't show every permutation here, but there are basically 2 schools of thought on how to do this. You can either stack the front line with your best tanks of Elcar and either Amadeus or Eric, and then back it up with crowd control specialists like Jaeger, or a hybrid like Petra who can off-tank, heal, and take down dangerous targets with her burst damage ability. Or you can put Amadeus in the back row as a third tank behind Elcar and Eric together, so it takes a longer time for damage to get to Margot's position. Interestingly enough, I think Jaeger is actually a bit more useful in Generation 4 than in Generation 3. In Generation 3, he had a confusing mishmash of skills in his kit that didn't take advantage of his highest attack power in the game. But now, since he has other people stronger than him to buff and debuff, he fits a little bit nicer into that niche and thus stays relevant here, if you can get over the fact that he sometimes heals the enemy team. Now A tier is also made up of all 3 new heroes, just going by how powerful they are. The only difference here is that now we have to reach all the way back to Generation 2 for Marlon to fill the ranks for damage dealing. He can support Margot's area of effect attack with an additional one and some more crowd control, and this helps keep up her uptime, but it also falls into A tier since Marlon is starting to fall off a bit in stats. Now interestingly, some people who run this formation will use their best archer equipment on Marlon and give the second best archer equipment to Rosa, because that will help Marlon do more AoE damage and stay up a bit longer for his crowd control. So if you're having trouble with any of these A tier formations, try that out and you might be pleasantly surprised, because Rosa quite frankly doesn't make good use of all of her stats. B tier is what you get if you have Rosa off the wheel and you have to choose between one of Elcar or Margot to build. Here you rely on Gen 2 and 3 heroes, or Amadeus, to fill the gaps. The Amadeus version is suitable for someone who used to spend a bit more but maybe now is cut back. But make no mistake, this is the most competitive B tier that we have seen thus far, and it could even go head to head with A tier, possibly even S tier from the prior generation, assuming an equivalent investment in all heroes. The power jump here is just that big. And finally, C tier once again is basically relying on the most free-to-play friendly heroes to make your team composition. Now remember that in Generation 4, the Gen 2 heroes like Marlon can now be found in the Hall of Heroes. And now we get into Generation 5. While the stat jump from Generation 4 to 5 is smaller than 3 to 4, the Gen 5 heroes come with amazing new combat abilities. I'll leave it to a hero review video to cover this more deeply, but basically you have Thrud tossing stun AoEs all over the place, Vivian wiping out backline targets that were previously safe behind the front line, and Long Fei providing self-immunity, self-healing, damage resistance, and even some contributions to damage dealing along the way. Therefore, we see these new heroes all over the top teams. Our S tier teams include all 3 new heroes, with Gen 4's Elcar still holding the front line due to his great uptime. Then the approach for the 5th remaining slot is either a drop-in of another massive damage dealer like Margot, or extend the uptime and effectiveness of Vivian and Thrud, which can be done by adding Rosa for her buffing, debuffing, and cleansing skills, or once again using Amadeus as a third tank to delay them in receiving damage. The Amadeus team will be slightly less effective versus an enemy Vivian team due to her backline reaching abilities. Our A tier teams primarily work for those who didn't build Elcar in Generation 4. They require using another character on the front line alongside Long Fei. The choices are moving Thrud to the front line, but then you definitely need Margot to replace Thrud's AoE damage coming offline sooner in the match. The other approach is to use Amadeus up front to absorb the damage. It's not shown here, but you could also get away with a well-built Eric in this frontline spot still. We also have the only A tier team that does not include Thrud or Vivian, and that's got Petra, Rosa, and Margot making up the backline. This is similar to the Generation 4 logic in protecting Margot and letting her do her thing as much as possible, just with Long Fei up in the front. And now we get to B tier, and in this tier we have teams that are missing some key pieces. For example, we have a team that can work without building Long Fei. Even if you pulled him on the wheel, you maybe maxed out Elcar last generation and aren't planning to build another infantry defensive widget. If so, this formation could work decently well. We also see our lowest ranked team that has all 3 Gen 5 heroes, largely due to using Margot to cover the lack of frontline infantry. Only do something like this if you don't have Elkar, Eric, or Amadeus that could play this role, otherwise you have access to better team configurations shown above. And our C tier teams are again the most free-to-play friendly. They all rely on wheel heroes plus 1 hero from a prior generation you would have built solely via orange shards. And this should be quite achievable over 4 prior generations. Zoe in the back row with Marlin Trick can still somewhat help, but it's not going to get you top marks anymore. So now that we've covered Generation 5, we're going to end the video here. Yes, Generation 6 is just starting to come out on the very earliest kingdoms, but at the time of publication, they aren't even in players' hands yet, nor can we see their combat widget abilities. Perhaps in the future, I'll continue updating this tier list for later generations, but for now, we'll call it here. And if you found this hero tier list helpful, then be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with the latest videos that I post. And if you are deciding which heroes to invest in, then you should definitely check out my Hero Reviews playlist, once again linked below in the description, which goes in-depth, hero by hero, skill by skill to help you make the right decision with your in-game resources. Hope to see you on the next one. Thanks again for watching, and happy gaming out there.